Please be seated. So I think I've decided that one of my jobs here as my role as a priest is to be a connector. Connect you with each other and then you to God. I think that's part of my role here at St. Margaret's Church. And it's a role that I relish because so many of us find ourselves disconnected in so many profound ways. There's not a week that goes by when I don't hear of somebody saying, I wish that I was more connected to my spouse. I wish there was a way that I could connect with my teenage daughter. I wish there was a way that I could feel more connected with my work. When I don't feel connected from my work, I wonder what I'm there for and why I exist and have all these questions. So connection is something that is very important because we find ourselves disconnected in so many very profound ways. Maybe you're thinking right now of a part of your life that you feel is disconnected from what it needs to be connected to. It's complicated because connection takes an awful lot of work. It takes an awful lot of energy. I'm just thinking about it here. I have an iPhone, and I use it to connect to everything from my family to my staff, to my fantasy football team, to all sorts of things. I mean, Rich was ordering crabs right before church. I mean, we couldn't do that years ago. Now we can. You can order crabs right before church. So the iPhone's a wonderful thing. It's a way to connect. But have you ever been a place where your batteries run out and you can't connect anymore, or you don't get a signal, right? So if your battery runs out, it's never an opportune time. There's never a good time for your cell phone battery to die, but it does happen, right? So they have a varying number of chargers that you can get. This is the charger that I have in my office here, and as you can see, it's a simple two-prong plug, right? Plugged into the wall. But then you've got to connect this thing to this, and this has 4 ports way in the back. I can see that at least, and what looks like a little computer keyboard on top of it, but I'm sure it's not that. So that's got to plug into this. You've got to figure out how to do that. And once you do that, it doesn't go that way, it goes this way, all right? Once you do that, then you've got to plug this into the actual port. Now this is a smaller plug, and I look in there and I don't really see anything. And my eyesight's pretty good for a 43-year-old, but I still can't see anything. There may be like some angels in there, I'm not sure. But somehow that goes into this thing on the back of that port, and it's got to go the right way, so I've got to figure out which way is up, and you never get it right the first time. So then you plug that in, and then you have the actual dock. Now, most of Apple's configurations have 30 pins in them. They're called 30-pin connectors, right? So you've got to plug this onto this little strip here, hoping that you don't bend anything. And these are always loose, right? So you put this on here, and voila, it's supposed to charge. But it always feels loose there, and so you always feel like there's going to be a connecting thing that you're going to break, or maybe it's already broken and maybe it doesn't work. Either way, it's complicated. It's complicated It's complicated for us to be able to connect with other people and with God. And this doesn't even take into account the things that block the connections. You know, and I think Apple's figured some stuff out to make the connections easier, but think about dust. When you have something that's not connecting, what do? You pull it out and you blow on it. You think that's going to work, right? Because you think it's going to get the dust off. Dust can hinder a connection. It can just kind of short something out. And metaphorically speaking, I think we have dust in our spiritual lives. Charles LaFond, who's a wonderful guy, great spiritual guy, he says that there are 2 cancers of the spiritual life. And I think they're twin cancers because they go together. They're the cancers of nostalgia and fantasy. Now, nostalgia gets in the way like dust in a connection, in that when we look back on the good old days, they weren't always so good. When our spiritual lives seem stagnant, we kind of go back and we say, oh, if it were only like it was back when I was going to the 10 o'clock service, you know, that service worked for me. Or if only the church could go back to doing this, you know, singing the old hymns, doing things the old way. That's when church was good, right? The problem with that is that it neglects the things that weren't so good about that. And whenever we look back with nostalgia, we tend to forget the things that weren't good, and we tend to romanticize the things that were good. Charles's sister often would say to their mother, I love movies like The White Chalk Cliffs of Dover, and I love reading books about the good old days in England during the war, and I yearn for those days again. And of course, Charles's mother, who lived through the war, said, look, we were getting bombed nightly. We lived in subway stations. We didn't know whether we were going to see tomorrow. Those were not good old days. They were actually quite rancid, and we don't look back on them with glee and with nostalgia. So nostalgia can get in the way of our spiritual lives. So can fantasy, though. And I think just like nostalgia is a lie of the past, fantasy is a lie of the future. When we think that things are going to be better once we do this, once we figure out this problem, then everything will be solved, and then we'll be right up there with God himself. I think the other part of fantasy is that we tend to fantasize about other people in our lives and the roles that they play. Think about this. If you have a needy friend, how many of you had needy friends? Some of you, okay? And they call you, and they want you to meet their needs, and you're on the phone with them for 20 minutes listening to their problems, listening. You're filling a fantasy of theirs. They're fantasizing that you are meeting their needs when you're just cringing on the other end of the phone. You're not really doing them any favors because you never signed up for that expectation. You never signed up to be their therapist. And you don't have to take that on you. I'm giving you permission to hang up the phone right now, all right? You don't have to do that. That's their fantasy. And I think sometimes we're that needy friend. Sometimes we want to box other people into the roles that we have already pre-described for them. And that can be very, very dangerous because they have not signed up for those expectations. And therefore, connection breaks down. Connection doesn't happen. All right? It's one of the things that we are all about here at St. Margaret's Church. We want to be a church that connects people. And as I said, it's very complicated and things get in the way. But Jesus today healed two people. He healed the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman, and he healed the man who was deaf and mute. Now, the Syrophoenician woman is the one that gets more buzz today because of the heated exchange between her and Jesus. And the wonderful thing that we lose sight of in this passage is that Jesus gets reconnected with his mission. This tense exchange between the Syrophoenician woman and our Savior almost shakes him out of his doldrums and reminds him what he is there for. Right? Remember the exchange. The Syrophoenician woman has a daughter with a demon. She comes to Jesus. She says, please help me. Heal my daughter. And Jesus says, wait a minute. I was first sent to the children of Israel. The children get the food before the dogs. All right? It's a slam. He insults her. He calls her, as a representative of Syrophoenician people, dogs. Now, you can't explain it, you can't excuse it, but let me give some context. Perhaps the Syrophoenician people of the region of Tyre were generally better off than the Jewish peasants who lived in that area. It was a Gentile area, right? Not a lot of Jews lived there, and they weren't very well off. The Syrophoenician woman probably had means, and yet she was coming to this Jewish preacher for healing for her daughter. All other avenues had been exhausted. And Jesus, maybe he was feeling a little full of himself. And maybe he was saying to himself, you see this rich woman, this rich Gentile can't get it done on her own. She's got to come to the Jewish person. I see how it works, right? So Jesus says, I got to feed the children before I feed you dogs, right? And she says, but even the dogs get the crumbs from the table, Jesus. And in that moment, he snaps out of it, and he says, you're right, and I'm actually here for everyone. I'm not just here for the children of Israel. I'm here for you too. I'm not just here for the members, but I'm here for the newcomers too. I'm not just here for the people that pledge more than $1,000 a year. I'm here for the people that give smaller amounts and might not give at all too. I'm not just here for the people who are here every week saying, "Nice message, Pastor," on the way out the door. I'm here for the people that are showing up late and the people who are just dying, their knuckles are dragging because they've spent so much energy just getting the kids in the car to come to church. Some of you there? Some of you like that? Jesus says, I'm here for all these people too, right? He remembers and reconnects with his mission. And here at St. Margaret's, we have to constantly be reminded to reconnect with our mission, to be a beacon of light for everyone in the world, everyone in this community, not just the insiders, right? I mean, there are ways that we can do that. Just, some of you came from coffee hour. It was a wonderful time to reconnect with our mission and reach out to people we don't know. There was a table of a woman, a daughter, and another couple who all joined kind of this summer. And it's wonderful to have a church where people come in and they reconnect with people they haven't seen for a couple months, and they kind of connoiter in their small groups and their circles. But let me give you a bit of advice. Break out of those circles and go sit at those tables with those newcomers. They're not going to meet anyone otherwise. You guys are the ones that have to reach out with that mission. Sarah can't do it. She's working the classrooms. Stuart's getting the slideshow going. I'm trying to figure out coffee, You guys are the ones that have to do that. That's our work together, right? And it's about connection. Everything we do here should be about connection. The classes that we do, the Bible that Stuart's going to read this year, the Pick and Mix Monday that Sarah's organized and James has organized for Monday nights, acolyting, ushering, welcoming. All those things are about connecting people with each other and connecting people to God. That's what we do at St. Margaret's. So hopefully you're able to tell someone, and they say, well, what do you do at your church? Do you have any ham suppers or anything important like that? You can say, we try to connect. We try to be a church of connection. We try to connect people with each other. We try to connect people with God. And that's not a mission statement. That's just kind of where it is right now, okay? The final thing, where are we sent to go? Because connection doesn't just exist in a vacuum. Connection has to mean something for you. It's got to send you out into the world to do something. Well, look at the Syrophoenician woman. Where did she go? She went back to her daughter, found the demon was gone, right? She went back into her normal everyday life, which is probably where most of you are going to go today. That's where you are sent to go, to be a minister of the Word, to be God's child, to be an agent of grace and healing. Just go back to your life. Go to your workplace. Go to your family table. Go to your relationships and be a child of God. See what happens. The deaf and mute man, he was sent out, but he was told to keep quiet, and he couldn't. He couldn't stop talking about what God had done for them. Maybe that's going to be you. Maybe you're sent forth to do preaching and to do witnessing and to tell people, this is how I've been connected to God. This is how I've learned about connection through my church community. There are people out there that need connection. And there are people out there who are unconnected and disconnected in some very, very profound ways. There are people who are addicted. And there are people who are hungry. And there are people who have their prongs bent so badly that they can't fit into any kind of outlet. You might not be able to straighten out their prongs, but you can be a witness. You can be someone that says, here's what God has done for me. Here's a God that loves you. Here's a God that has redeemed you. Here's a God that looks at you as an agent of grace, unprecedented, irrepeatable, and irreplaceable. Here's a God that calls you his child. Here's a God who will heal you. Who wouldn't want to hear that? Who wouldn't want to hear about a God that loves them deeply? A God that redeems them beyond measure? Who wouldn't want to hear about a God that desires wholeness for all of God's creation? You know it. You believe it. It is yours to go out into the world and share that good news. Amen.